My name is Randy Howell, and you're listening to the Faith and Fishing Podcast.
Welcome to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. I'm Cam.
And I'm Robert. In every episode, we're bringing you faith stories and fishing memories from some amazing members of the fishing community.
So join us as we shed a positive light on all things faith and fishing. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. I'm Cam.
Hey, and I'm Robert.
And we've got another awesome saltwater episode for you this time. I did not expect them to be back to back, but that's how they fell. But I know y'all are not complaining because y'all are excited to hear and learn all kinds of saltwater fishing, whether you're actually on the coast or whether you're landlocked and living vicariously through others. So that's going to be an awesome interview. But Robert, man, how is it going, brother?
Dude, it's going pretty good. So we just got back from the beach for a few days. So we did some work on the house, did a little surf fishing. Didn't take the kayaks this time, but I'm hoping next time I'm taking the kayaks and I'm going to troll for some Spanish and see what we can do on those deals. So we caught some croaker, a couple whiting, just some small fish, but Ryder had a good time. He had a buddy with him. So they were on the bicycles going fishing and running and ripping, and they did help us paint a couple of the outbuildings. And so I got a little bit of work out of them. And they're on spring break this week. So that was good for them to have 5 days down there. Good for me to not be, when you go away, it's kind of like you press hold on all your problems. You go across that bridge to Oak Island or, whatever community you're at towards the coast. And, you just push hold on everything. Even though we were working, doing stuff, it was nice to let your brain relax from the normal household duties and regular work. So it was good. What about you, man?
For sure. Yeah. I'm actually, this weekend, I'm heading the other direction. We're going to the mountains, and it's going to be the same thing, just press pause and just relax a little bit. But things are going well. Little crazy with work, but I will say, let's see, Monday I had the day off because I worked a Saturday shift. And I got to take Henry out and do a little bit more fishing, and he caught a couple more bluegill. He caught one that was a big one. I put air quotes up there because it was a decent sized bluegill. It was actually eating size, but he had trouble getting his hands around it, and whenever it flexed, he couldn't control it, and he didn't like that very much. And he was, crying and everything. And I was like, do you want to go home? He's like, want to go home? I was like, are you ever going to want to go fishing again? He's like, no. And we get home and my wife asked, said, so what did you do at school today? He said, went fishing, caught big one. Yeah, so it's like he's still learning. He's still hooked. He's still hooked. He just got startled. That was all. But yeah, man, I know you, since we last talked, you fished a tournament.
Yeah.
How did that one go?
Yeah. So let's see, that was Harris Lake. And, that's the first one that I got to stay for most of the time. I cut it still a little bit short. I don't really remember what I had that afternoon. It was maybe a ball game, practice, something I had to get on out of there. But I did pretty good. I think I was like mid-20s somewhere out of 80. So ended up catching 3 fish, 19 and a quarter, I think a 14 and maybe like a 12.5. Had to do over. I'd change a couple things, but made a pretty decent run to a spot that I've just fished history. I didn't do any pre-fishing. So, that spot did pretty well, but I probably should have fished that spot a little faster and then hit a couple other pockets where I was at. I probably could have got those other two fish and been up there pretty high. But not a bad first full tournament. I'll take it. And then McIntosh is coming up, not this weekend, but next weekend. So I did pretty well there last time. I probably won't get to pre-fish it again, but I'm okay with that because I've got the spot that I was at last time. I think it'll be holding fish, and then I got some similar spots like that as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. Yeah, I kept watch on the leaderboard for you, and I was there were early on. I was looking. I was like, man, he's in the top 10. He gets a couple more. He's going to be doing well. And I texted you, and I was like, keep on him.
Yeah.
And then you didn't catch any more. So
no, I caught one. Yeah, I had two early, fairly early, and then even before I caught those two, I was using that black and blue Witty crankbait, and one swiped at it as I pulled it out of the water. I mean, it was right beside me, and if I'd have left it in the water for another 2 seconds, even a second, I probably would have caught him. That was the first bite I had, and then I caught the bigger fish, and then I caught the 14, and then I was talking to my sister on the phone and kind of was really not paying attention, and I missed one on a shaky head. So if I'd have had that first one and then the shaky head one, that's the only 5 bites I got. The 3 that I caught, the one early on that Witty, I think it was a 1.5. I was just kind of wiggling it across the top of the water real early, and then that one on the shaky head that I missed, probably didn't have it real good. But also too, I was on the phone like this trying to set the hook. So, it is what it is though. It's cool.
I hear you. Well, man, let's say thank you to a couple of sponsors real quick, and then let's get our guest in here.
Sounds good.
Mr. B Lure Company is making high-quality, handcrafted lures and has been for 30 years, right here in the U.S. Using all-metal components, Owner and Gamakatsu hooks, and silicone or frog hair skirts, Mr. B is pumping out some awesome spinner baits, jigs, buzz baits, underspins, and more, including some of the most unique bladed jigs on the market. To fill up your tackle box, go to MrBLureCompany.com, that's MRBLureCompany.com, and use promo code FaithandFishingPod1X10 at checkout to save 10% on your first order. That's Faith the letter N, Fish the letter N, P-O-D, so Faith and Fishing Pod, just like our Instagram handle, 1X10. If a fly rod is your weapon of choice, check out Atollas. Their Fly Caddy is the most convenient way to get your favorite flies to the water, or just keep them handy by clipping it to your hat, truck visor, backpack, rod case, or just whatever. You can also bundle it up with flies from independent fly tires that Atollas has teamed up with through their Fly Light project. Choose from bundles specializing in redfish, carp, saltwater, or freshwater. Head over to atollas.co, that's ATOLLAS.co, to get your Fly Caddy today and use promo code FaithandFish15 to save 15% on your order. That's Faith the letter N, Fish the number 15 at checkout for 15% off. All right. So whenever you go to a seminar for saltwater fishing, you end up having saltwater guests on your podcast, and I am excited about it. This was one of the guys up there that the entire time he was up there, you could see how much he loved what he was doing. I mean, he was tickled every time he was thinking about some of these fish that he fights. But let's go ahead and get him in, and let's see if he can hear us.
It sounds like we can hear him now.
Yeah,
there we go.
All right, man. Yeah, I was just talking about how whenever you were there at the Cashin seminar, how like just your joy of fishing just oozed from you whenever you were talking about, especially some of that like false albacore or what was it? Was it the false albacore bite that you were talking about?
Yeah. I was talking about false albacore. I get pretty fired up about everything when the mood hits me right. It's just, Ricky Kellum's the trout master, especially up that way. Like, Ricky's like a god or something with that crowd. So I stayed in my lane up there. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. Well, welcome to the show, brother.
I'm glad to be here, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So to get us started off, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us who Captain Joe Tunstall is.
All right. Well, I'll try to keep that brief then. I'm Captain Joe Tunstall of Carolina Traditions Guide Company. Born and raised in Carteret County. I moved down east, past Harker's Island about 22 years ago. I've been fortunate to been around a lot of good people in my life, and I've learned a lot of good things, and the people that I've been around learned a lot from a lot of good people. And what I do now was kind of a dream of mine starting back about 2003, I'd say, and the timing just wasn't right then. A lot of things in life are about the right timing. It's not our timing, it's God's timing, and you have to be prepared for that mindset when it comes around to it. And everything, I look back a lot of times, people on my charters will ask me how it is I came to do what I did, and I kind of have come to a little story there. And the way I look at it is that everything that I did in life, regardless of how meaningless I thought it was at the time, or how far it was from what it was I wanted to achieve, when I look back on it now, I see that everything I did was to bring me right here in this moment. And by a lot of people's standards, I probably don't have as much as other people. My boats aren't new. I mean, they're pretty much all paid for, and so is my truck. But everything that I did, in some way helped me be where I am now. And, we started Carolina Traditions, me and a buddy, in 2012, and we had a round stern Harker's Island built boat. And we just used to do some really basic charters or whatever. And it kind of evolved into a small boat operation. Probably I started turning it that way like 2015, 2016. I was working on a research boat, and I've been from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of Maine, and did that for a couple of years, and saw other parts of the coast and met a lot of other great people. And when I come back, I had my stuff paid for, so I was able to fish for 6, 8, 10 days in a row, and I kind of built a reputation up. And I didn't really intend to become a fishing guide. It just kind of was an evolution. You guys were talking about your kids and how much joy you get from taking them fishing, and that's really the essence of it all. A real guide enjoys catching fish, but probably the ultimate challenge is being able to put people on his boat and get them to become successful fishermen, because it's kind of like the old adage, if you give a man a fish, you can feed him for a day, whereas if you teach him to fish, you can feed him for a lifetime. And passing that joy on to other people. And fishing's it's like the title of your podcast, man. Fishing's all about faith. You ain't gonna go out there, and if you expect to catch them every time and win a tournament or fill a cooler or whatever, it just ain't happening. So it's a lot about faith from the moment that you start planning the week before, the night before, or the month before. Like if you go on a big fishing vacation, to right up until the morning that you're leaving. And I used to lay awake at night and worry about, where am I going to fish at? What am I going to do? And those trips were frustrating for me early on, because I had these people paying me this money and I didn't want to let them down, and now I don't even do that. I kind of get an idea about where the wind's blowing and what the tide's doing. And I don't really set my mind to go to a specific place. I kind of hit the water. And when I hit the water that morning, I kind of make my decision based on that, and I go to those spots and sometimes we don't start out on the fish, but we end up on them most of the time. So some of the best days I have are where we started out slow and ended up strong. So that's just kind of what my whole mantra is built on. Everything I do to take people out fishing and what my whole business is based around, the tradition of fishing and how it brings people joy and brings people together.
That's awesome. So last week we had the speckled specialist on. So we talked a lot about speckled trout. This week I wanted to kind of give you a chance to tell listeners what all you take people out to target. So depending on what time of year and all that good stuff, kind of run through the gamut of what you offer as a guide.
All right. Well, so let's start out with the first part of the year. We come out of December into January, and I'm doing a whole lot of backwater drum fishing fishing schools of fish in pretty skinny, quiet backwater. Real stealthy fishing. A lot of sight fishing goes on then. And around that time, I'm also running out around Cape Lookout, and we're doing a lot of surf fishing in the ocean. And we fish big schools of drum out there. If it's pretty, we'll ride around and look for schools of adult redfish out there. One of my best days was January 2022, January 2nd. We fished acres of adult-sized redfish. Me and my buddy caught them for the first time in my life till I was actually literally tired of catching them. Worn out, and do a lot of that, and that's what I look forward to. And there's a lot of good opportunities. You can find albacore 5-6 miles, 3 miles offshore, depending on what kind of weather pattern you're in these winter months. A lot of nice sea bass. You could always luck up and find a few king mackerel around some of the wrecks. And then I'll move in this time of year. I'm still, bluefish are starting to show up, and what I'm waiting for this time of year, some of my best fishing has been around April on a lot of different species, but I'm looking for those big full-grown bluefish, those 12, 14, up to 20-pound bluefish coming in. I like to catch those on top water or fly. There's still lots of black sea bass around, and we'll look for them some too. Your gray trout and your sea mullet or weak fish and whiting, they're starting to show up. So I run a lot of charters last winter. We had a lot of wind, so we did a lot of charters for the sea mullet and gray trout. Then we'll be moving into the bonito, the Atlantic bonito, which are delicious sushi grade tunas, little tiny tunas, and they're wonderful to eat and real fun to catch. They've kind of become here recently a little rare, and they're a lot more of a first thing in the morning fishery. They don't like real crowded areas, so they'll be around some of your near shore wrecks and some of your ledges, rock jetties off the ocean, stuff like that. But if there's a lot of boat traffic, you're going to have to catch them at first light. Your albacore are moving back in on the beach. We've got 66, 68 degree water right off the beach right now. So Spanish, bluefish, albacore showing up. And so I'll start focusing on that. Tomorrow afternoon, I got a nearshore trip with a dad and his nephew and 2 sons. And we're going out there looking some Spanish and bluefish tomorrow. And then I'll kind of settle in. It'll be the Spanish and bluefish thing for most of the summer. Maybe finding some gray trout, and then I'll get more back focused on we come into like May and June, top water speckled trout on the grass flats. A whole lot of sight fishing for red drum up until it starts to get real hot in July, and then same thing. You just have to alter your patterns, and I'll go through the summer, and then about mid-August we'll start hitting the trophy redfish, and then I'll pretty much run that whole season all the way through, depending on when we have our first hard cold front, the first week or so of October. And then it's back on albacore again. It's a nearshore albacore, big Spanish, bluefish bite. And then it's into speckled trout, and your sea mullet are running again. Your gray trout are pushing real hard again, finishing up with your albacore, and then it's back again, doing some winter trout fishing and looking for those big schools of redfish in the backwater, and trying to catch those adult redfish as they come out of the Pamlico Sound and the Neuse River into the ocean again. That's kind of, my year in a focus, if you will.
So if you want to just catch whatever North Carolina has to offer, this is your guy. I mean, that's a list right there. I've always been one that would I typically, for a while, last time we hit was right before COVID hit, but we always would, me and a buddy would always go down this time of year or a little bit earlier than this, and try and get on the early sea mullet and blue bite. Because I mean, in terms of eating, I think blues are extremely underrated. And if you get a hold of a big one, there's just something about catching something that can take your finger off. That is just, it gives you a rush. And I mean, those things fight like a truck. And then sea mullet, man, there are a few fish out there that make a better sandwich than a sea mullet. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man. So, so right now, so you said you're starting to do like top water for blues and trolling for. Are you trolling yet, or?
I don't do much trolling. Pretty much everything I do is casting. About the only trolling that I do, even when I'm live bait fishing, when I do that, I mostly just drift. I'll pick an area and just kind of drift through there. But about the only trolling I do are those diving plugs for bonito. And while I'm looking those bonito in the morning or around the wrecks or whatever, I'll be trolling those diving plugs, and you can catch those small early summer kings, the ones that are actually good to eat. You can catch those. They're pretty fun because I'm just using big spinning rods, like 15 to 20 pound spinning rods with 5,000 class reels. And so it's fun to catch a king like that. That's really all you need to catch an average size king, and anything more than that is not as challenging, and it's just, people like it. Trolling around for those bonito and casting at some Spanish or albacore, and then all of a sudden your drag starts peeling back, and it's a 14, 16 pound king mackerel, 12 pound king mackerel peeling some line back. And like we had a day last spring trolling for bonito around one of the wrecks and doubled up 2 kings at one time, and we only got one to the boat. Both of them came to the boat, but we only got one in the boat. She broke the treble hook off the diving plug from twisting around, but anyway, it's all you really wanted anyway. And they're like, oh man, this. And I said, man, look, king mackerel get a bad rap too. I said, the smaller ones are good to eat. I said, if you don't like the way I cut a couple of fillets, and I said, if you don't like the way it grills or bakes, I said, smoke it and turn it into a dip. I said, it's about as good as it gets if you turn it into a dip. Real simple dip, and they're delicious. But you're right, bluefish get a bad rap. I eat fresh bluefish. If people don't try them, I try to encourage them to at least keep a few. So let me bleed them out. I'll skin them. Actually, a guy turned me on last year. I make some ceviche. They make a pretty decent ceviche right off the bat. You go ahead and bleed them and cut them up, put them in some lime juice with some soy sauce and a little bit of seasoning, and they're a lot better than I thought they would be that way. They don't. It's really surprising. Especially when you wait for the meat to turn color. It's really good. But I'll grill them up with some lemon pepper and olive oil, and aside from that, just the fight value of them, like you said, is underrated. I tell people, okay, you might catch a lot of bluefish trolling and you might fuss at them or whatever. I said, but you throw one of those 4-inch topwater plugs at them and let them eat that. And I said, we'll see how you feel about it then, And most of the time they're like, 3 hours have gone by and they've been catching bluefish nonstop. And they're like, oh man, this was great.
Absolutely. What's your busiest time of year?
Fall, man. It starts. I run all the regular summer trips, sometimes as many as 3 half days in a day. Back during the second year of the pandemic at Chasing Tails, we ran up to 4 half days in a day, and then go work at the shop afterwards. But I got all that. But I have to say, really, truly, as far as quality trips and quantity, it would have to be September or last part of August through Thanksgiving is probably my busiest time. I've had some, I'm sure you guys have too, but I've had some epic fishing around Thanksgiving week. I mean, just phenomenal days fishing, because a lot of times you're going to get that first big cold front come through around Thanksgiving, and that's going to push the bulk of your fall shrimp out, and you're going to have your mullet runs around that time, and everything is feeling the crush to have to feed up because it's about to be wintertime, so it's really epic fishing around that time.
Absolutely. And if somebody wants to book you for a charter, how far in advance do they typically need to reach out to you?
I'm already booking now for October, so it depends on what they want to do. I try to encourage my big drum people to try to have me booked up by June or July, because it seems like, the world conditions us and people are conditioned to kind of be in the mindset of a season, at least outdoorsman people. They're kind of a season ahead, they're thinking ahead to the next season. And so about time, people are into their summer groove, kids are out of school, they've got their vacation plan. That's usually when the fall crunch starts. I've got people, are you still available for October, November, December, and so I'll start booking up by then. Like I said, I've already got several dates booked for October. September, I've got several trophy drum trips booked. I'm not booked up yet. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but people are conscious of what's going on, so they're being precautious. But I can't complain because I'm still getting booked. I'm blessed to be able to have good clients.
Absolutely. And Robert, I'm sorry, I've been hogging the questions. I'll let you ask a few also.
But no, just kind of, I'll go along with the same. What you guys are talking about as far as the booking goes. Usually, how many days are you working? You can do it. I don't know. Most guys, I think, keep up with it for the year. You book out. How many roughly off the top of your head you think you're booked out of 365? How many times are you going out?
Last year I ran. I haven't. I don't add it up like I should, but I ran between 180 and 200 last year. My busiest was the second year of the pandemic, and I ran. I think I ran about 280, 285, 286.
Okay, yeah.
That was busy, man. I kind of wanted to dial back from that. And really, honestly, I prefer to run more 3/4 day and full day trips. There's a lot of guides who don't like that. They like to cram a bunch of half days because in the reality, you make more money that way. But it's all about the people for me. I like spending more. I like to select my clients. I like to be real with them, and I like a certain type of clientele, and those people I like to spend time with. I try to. There's a word I'm looking for that everybody uses now, like when somebody custom shops for you or picks out restaurants or whatever. It's like being procured or whatever. But that's kind of how I like to do it, and I like to talk to all my people, and if I don't think they're a good fit, I'll try to send them to another guide, or I'll be straight up with them. So I like having people that I like to spend time with and like spending time with me. So I try to do more 3/4 and full days, but so I'm okay with it. And if I can fish 5 days a week, that's perfect. I'll do 7, no problem. 6 is probably just the right, 6 days a week. But if I fish 5 days a week and I can run 8 trips out of a week in 5 days, and that makes me pretty happy.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty busy schedule. So that's so a little bit kind of about. Maybe you can help shed some light on this for me. So most of the time, if I am doing saltwater fishing, we're mostly trolling, and I've got a good buddy that's got a 30-foot Grady White. So most of the time, we're going out either trolling for wahoo, mahi, hitting grass lines. I never have really done a lot of near shore and definitely not a lot of inshore fishing. But with me having a house in Oak Island now, I'm looking to kayak inshore to maybe there's an artificial reef that's at Yopon Beach right there. That's only about a mile offshore. So the mainly the near shore stuff I've done is trolling for Spanish and blues with Clark spoons or planers and things like that. And we fish the Cape a lot where you're at, as he goes out of Radio Island. If I fish with him, we go out of Moorhead. So we'll go usually the first week of May, and normally our routine has been on Thursday. We'll book with Steven and go on the bill collector and have one day that we go out and go with him. Nate, I don't know if you know those guys, but Nate used to be on the boat with Steven. Now he's on a different boat. But then on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'll go on my buddy Ernie's boat and just a lot of times we'll run out 60, 70 miles too and hit some stuff out there. And then one day we'll stay in close and do some Spanish stuff. But what can you tell me about somebody who's just getting into, like, for me, what you're talking about on catching these bluefish on this top water, man, I'm all about that, but I've never fished for them that way. So, and when we troll for Spanish, we'll catch a lot of blues and we'll keep them and we treat them just like the Spanish. I think they're good eating too. And we'll fillet them out and put aluminum foil around them, put a pat of butter on them and season them up, put them on the grill. So I like to eat them, but man, I'm intrigued about this topwater deal. You guys doing that around some wrecks, or is it basically kind of the same place you're trolling up and down to the Cape and back? If I'm looking to get into that, what should I be looking for, and what kind of spots should I be looking for to do some topwater bluefish fishing?
That's an excellent question, Robert. I put those guys are good. We had a lot of accounts of Chasing Tails, so I met a lot of dudes, and I remember their boats more than I do their names. But I spent a lot of time offshore early on because it was the best way to make money, and I guess towboat kind of cured me of my offshore desire. But the bluefish, most of what I do, anywhere that you're catching them trolling, if you can figure out what depth they're going to be at, you can cast for them too. If we ride around and can't find them on the surface, we'll mark them and then just stop and drift and cast for them with 3/4 or 1 ounce metal jigs. And you're not doing it slow. Because think about it, they like fast moving targets. The old adage, if you're catching more blues and you want to catch more Spanish, you speed up. And it's kind of that way. The most frustrating part behind it is sometimes, especially later season, when you get those bigger, smarter Spanish, they won't hit. They get kind of funny when you get over 20 or 25 pound leaders. So, but most of the summer you can use 30 pound leader and you can catch right many fish before you get cut off, But anywhere around the inlets, if you're seeing any bird activity, if you kind of zoom in and study on that bird activity, you'll typically see some surface action underneath those birds. Because morning and evening all around Beaufort Inlet there over on that shoal side, and a lot of times that's where I'm at. I'm over top of all them shoals, 3, 5, 6, 8 foot of water, and I'm kind of got my engine running, and I'm more or less kind of doing a calculated drift across those shoals. And we're just casting across those shoals with top water, or Salty Bay makes some that they've got a head, it's called a shiner minnow. It's kind of like a little curly tail. They're cheaper, any type of metal. I use Clark spoon casting jigs or beach bum lures by Tim Still, any type of metal, but whatever your flavor is, man. Sting Silvers, Castmasters, whatever. Big Nick, Spanish Candy, they're great. And I'm just ripping those out across there, and I'm pulling it just fast enough if I'm throwing a metal jig to where it's not breaking the surface consistently. And a top water plug, if you're on that bluefish bite, it's not too particular. If that top water's in there and it's moving at all and that rattle's going or it's making a shine, they're going to trash it. But anywhere around Beaufort Inlet, the rock jetty there at Fort Macon, that whole tip of Shackelford for about a half a mile around the ocean side to about an eighth of a mile, maybe as far up as the ferry dock on the backside, depending on traffic and weather conditions. A lot of times, if you have a hard southwest wind and you can't do anything else, they're going to be back in there. There'll be a rip behind the point of Shackelford over towards, Harker's Island, Beaufort side. There'll be a little rip coming off of there, and you can kind of see it. There'll be a color change. That notoriously holds Spanish and some pretty big Spanish. Like sometimes it's almost easier. You could get out of the boat and stand on the sand there and cast into that rip from the beach almost easier than you can fish it on a hard southwest from the boat. Next, over to Cape Lookout around Barden's Inlet. And you can apply the same stuff probably down to those little inlets at Oak Island, too. I'm sure it's no problem. But over at Barden's Inlet, first thing in the morning, when you come around in front of the lighthouse, there's a big shoal there. A lot of times that shoal holds big bluefish all year round. In the summer months, it'll be 3 to 6 pound blues. This time of year, I fished several days, started and ended them right there on those sandbars in front of the lighthouse when you're coming out Barden's Inlet there. I fished lots of days there on top water where we were catching 12 to 16 pound bluefish on top water, doubled up. And you can kind of see them. I'm actually looking in the water, and they look like sometimes they're as thick as hair on a cat's back. Other times it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cruising around. And if you see some bird activity around there and you stop and study it, you'll see them bust something out of the water. They move lightning fast. Those big blues can either hang out and be cool, or they'll move so fast that you'll be like, wait a minute, did I just see something? If you saw something splash and trash the water, it was probably them. And you can just you got 2 or 3 guys on a boat, you can cast around, kind of shotgun spread it around all the directions there. And you 4 or 5 casts, you should have a blow up. If not, it's time to look for where those birds are again. And then moving on out there, a pretty consistent place to catch them. Obviously, when you come out the bite into the ocean from inside the Cape there around the actual point into the ocean, when you come around there, it's called the bite of the Cape. When you come around there, there's usually a rip and some sandbars there on the south west facing side. There's always blues and typically Spanish around there on that edge. And then coming around over to the rock jetty, that rock jetty's like a stop net or a pier. They come up to that rock jetty and they swim around the end of it, or they'll come up to the rocks and travel down. And if it's high tide, they'll bounce across those rocks. So you can throw anywhere around the end of those rocks, or anywhere close to the end of those rocks up to the, if it's got enough water, you can throw that top water across the rock jetty and you'll typically get a blow up. And that'll be from probably, I would say, late, this year for sure, because it warmed up a little bit, the latter part of March all the way through December, you can catch those blues and a few Spanish, depending on how warm it is in the fall too, that rock jetty. And as far as out around the shoals go, that just depends on your comfort level. I'm typically going to work my way right up in the whitewater if I've got the people on the boat that can do it and it's not too sloppy. But I go all in and around and across those shoals where a lot of people just don't, but I've been fishing in shoals my whole life. So they'll get, last year we fished, last spring we were fishing schools that were acres upon acres of blues in there. It was just thousands. And same with last fall. I've got some video footage on my phone from last spring. That's the largest school of bluefish that I've ever seen, and it was probably 5 or 6 acres of them. I've never seen so many fish in my life. And all you have to do, you could throw some bubble gum on the end of a wine cork with a treble hook, and they'll eat that. But, I've kind of found, another little trick about that is I've found that larger topwater plugs, like those big Skitter V's, the 6-inch Skitter V, I don't fish trebles on anything. I put inline singles on there, and those big skidder V's have 3 hook loops on them, and I just take the third one off, and I'll do the front one and the back one. I'm gonna put like a 3/0 inline single hook on there, and you might miss a few, but that's part of the excitement. But when you hook one, you hook it good, And what's really fun is with those bigger bluefish, those 12 to 18-pound bluefish, you get 2 of them, and you come back with half of one of them plugs because they hit it so hard, hitting in opposite directions that they break it in half. But what I found with the larger size topwater plug is you don't get cut off as bad because it's a bigger plug. They can come at it and trash that body, and instead of like wanting to hit the eyeball where they're going to twist it and cut the line off, with the bigger plug, you'll keep your plug a little bit longer. I bought a silver spook last year. I found some somewhere that were a little cheaper or whatever, and I've got some standard size silver spooks, and it's clear. They've eat all the paint off of it. Why that one survived and I lost 10 other ones, I have no idea. But one of those days, even with 40 or 50-pound last spring when I was talking about, it's not that bad, so don't get scared away. But it was just such a good bite, I couldn't turn away from it. But I probably lost 12 topwater plugs that day, so that was a little painful. And that's not usually how it goes. I mean, usually I might lose 1 or 2, or they'll spit one out, and I'll go back over there and go get it, and they'll come back and congregate again. But one of the tricks I've learned is they're not leader shy most of the time, so you can use 40-pound leader. And the bigger the plug, the less likely you are to get cut off. So, it ain't got to be a top dollar plug either. I mean, I'll order a 5-pack from China off of Amazon. They used to be like $30 for a 5-pack of topwater plugs, and I'll just change the hooks and the split rings out and let her eat. And that way, if she catches 15 or 20 bluefish on it, then it's paid for itself. It don't owe me nothing. But that's kind of what you're looking for. The birds are going to be your first key. And anywhere that you can find a hard break where you have a current rip, or anywhere that you're going to have whitewater, if you can, fish safely from the boat or from the land and cast into that breaking whitewater, then you're probably going to be able to find some blues there, because they're going to use that wash to their advantage.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, I could sit and have this conversation for 6 days straight, but I want to make sure that we get a chance to hear your faith story too, man. So why don't we dive into that a little bit? Tell us your faith story. What is it that you believe, and how did you come to believe that?
That started for me when I moved down east. I'd been living, I had, my son's grown now, but I had 2 boys and a fresh relationship and 2 dogs. And we'd been sleeping in our truck. I had a truck and she had a Tahoe, and we were bouncing around. We stayed at Radio Island some, and we stayed at different places. You can stay a couple of nights, and then they come run you off or whatever. And the only trick was, once it started getting hot, we didn't have enough money to leave our trucks run all the time, and didn't want anything bad to happen, like carbon monoxide poisoning or whatever. But, we'd run the air conditioner for a little while, and then there directly the gnats would ease up, and you could crack the windows and get a nice breeze at night. But I got called down to a house, and it was after Hurricane Isabel, I think, real bad one that we had, a lot of FEMA damage. And there was a house that had the owners, the builders who had built the house had passed away, and the house had been kind of sitting there neglected. And the niece who owned the house wanted to put it back together. And so I went down there to do some cleaning, because I had, amongst many other things, I had a landscape business at the time. And I went down there to clean it up. And how I come about this job was when I worked at the prison. I took several criminal justice classes, and really wanted to be a park ranger is what I wanted to be. And instead of, I was a knothead. So instead of wanting to go to college, you can get your experience to become a park ranger with 5 years law enforcement experience from the state. So one way of doing that was to become a corrections officer. So I put my time in there and did some stuff, and was an armory and a transport officer. But anyway, I met a guy named Bud Hill, and he knew a lot of people. He was in the Masonic Lodge, and he's a Shriner now. But he called me down there. I ran into him, and he said, "I got some work for you." So I went down there, and we'd been working for 2 or 3 days. And he says, something or another. I don't know what it was. And I was, somehow I slipped up and told him I'd been sleeping in the truck or whatever. And that really, really got to him. And he says, she's looking for someone to live in this house. And if you'll do some work to it, you can probably live rent free for, a year or so and keep up on stuff, because there's a lot of work to do. Isabel just tore everything up. But so anyway, I got down there in the community and it was all this rhetorical problem. I didn't have enough. You're living down in Stacy, and it was a lot different back then. There wasn't Dollar Generals on every corner, and hell, the gas stations weren't even open. Like, you couldn't go to the pump and pump gas at night. They didn't have credit card things, So it was a lot different, and you had to really make your blows count when you went into town. And even if it was for a job, I had to plan all that out to have enough money to do that, because you got to provide for them youngins, make sure that they got diapers and food and all that stuff. And anyway, I kind of got plugged in with the community down there and started doing all kinds of different work. I did work on shrimp trawlers and oyster tonging and pound nets for flounder. That's why I don't have a whole lot of tolerance for this hate speech, because I've done it all and I've seen the right way to do it. And those people were good to me. I wouldn't have what I have today if it wasn't for what those people did for me. A lot of good folks, Kerry Harris and Stuart Payne, and a lot of good people down here looked after me. Anyway, I got plugged in with the community, and there was this little church up the road there, and it was in a gas station. The gas station used to be called The Last Stop, and they turned it into a church called Lighthouse Community Church. Well, these people that were helping me were all part of this church, and so I went over to the church, and next thing you know, Sunday evenings turned into choir practice, turned into Bible study, turned into one thing. And now you got to keep in mind, I grew up in the church, a Pentecostal Holiness Church down the Salter Path, so I've been in church my whole life. Glad Tidings went there, when it was just one building. It wasn't a mega church like it is now. So I'd been around Jesus and been in church my whole life. And so I wasn't, a little thick-skinned there when it comes to that stuff. And this crowd down here at this church, man, it was just different. They would play a lot of praise and worship music, and next thing you know, we'd be standing there with our shoes off, just worshiping the Lord, listening to music. And I had never exactly felt it that way. I'd always been so used to the formalities of everything, the suits and the ties and the bragging about brother this and that. How much are you going to tithe this week? And, a lot of that put a bad taste in my mouth. But this church wasn't like that. These people were different. They cared about the community. They brought in the drunks. They brought in the pill heads. They brought in the people who actually needed Christ, not the ones who used Christ to their advantage. And, I spent a lot of time there in that church for a lot of years and did a lot for them. And I started paying my tithe because I didn't understand that either. I said, what, some preacher man sit back and eat fried chicken because I'm paying in my tithes? That ain't the way it is. Tithes are faith, just like fishing. We pay our tithes to give our faith forward. That's what tithing's about. So I realized that, and God bless the man. His name was Jim Springsteen. He was a welder and a preacher. And he taught these things, and he taught a lot out of Paul. He taught a lot out of Acts and Corinthians. Everything that Paul had to say, he taught a lot of. Ephesians was one of his favorite books. And so I read the New Testament, I think 4 times from front to back. And then I started on the Old Testament, and I've made it about 2/3 of the way through that 2 or 3 times. That's some tough reading there, regardless of what version of the Bible that you're in. But there's a lot of good backstory there for the New Testament. And I did my, I looked after my community, and I looked after my family, and I put my time in and put my faith back in towards Jesus Christ. And next thing I knew, we were paying our vehicles off, and I had a good job, and I came into a little bit of good fortune, and I paid that forward. We bought a member of the church, bought her a car. And I gave money to other people in the community, and I'm glad that I did it all because that's what I believed in. And I got to say that every day in everything that I do, I don't go to church very much anymore, but every day that I'm in church is every day that I'm on my boat. I'm surrounded by God, and I'm surrounded by everything that he's created, and I'm passing on the faith that he invested in me every day that I can make contact with a client. And every time that a door opens, I'm sharing my story with them in one way or another, whether it's a direct message like what I just gave you guys, or whether it's an indirect message through something else. And just like I talk about, everything that I did in my life has led me to where I am now, or if I'm talking about Carteret County history or the horses or whatever I'm talking about, Jesus is everywhere. Every time I see a blue redfish tail in 14 inches of water, that's Jesus to me, because he created that fish for a reason and a purpose. And everything I do, I'm reminded of that purpose that Christ created, that all living things to serve him. So that's kind of the way I see it, man. And that's what I try to do with everybody that steps foot on my boat. And even what you heard in me when I did that seminar, I give that same energy, sometimes a lot more, in every seminar that I give, because I want to inspire people to get out there and get outside and be in the house of the Lord as I see it. So there's certainly something to be said for actually being in the walls of the house of the Lord. But I think, to me, there's a lot more to be said for being in the house of the Lord outside in his creation, And I just try to bring in, wherever 2 or 3 or more are gathered, which is us 3 right here, there shall it be. That's church, So that's the way I look at it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's good. It's good stuff right there.
All right. So with all of our guests, there's 2 questions that we always make sure that we ask. And so one of them, what fishing story or memory means the most to you?
Wow, that's a good one. I'm going to go with the theme that you guys started before you run me in on this, and that's my son. I was just talking about it the other day. He really got fun to take fishing when he was about 4 years old. I drug him around with me way before then. I was practically had him in one of them little papoose things, have him out there fishing or whatever. I couldn't wait to get him out there. That's all I was waiting for, But when he was about 4 years old, I bought him his first one of them little Scooby-Doo rods, one of them little Zebco 33 looking things. And I put new fishing line on it because that stuff's junk, and I tested it out with a little 1/4 ounce jig head and a curly tail. And we went out fishing a couple of times with it. And, of course, we practiced in the yard, and we practiced. And then fall trout season came, and he was all fired up, man. He's like, let's go fishing, Daddy. I said, all right, buddy. So we go down there, and he's got his little push-button rod, and I've caught 8 or 9 trout, and he's like, Daddy, I don't think this thing works. It ain't going to catch no fish. I said, oh, yeah, is that how you feel, Buddy Real? I said, well, hand me that rod. So he handed it to me, and I handed him mine, and he's casting out there trying to do his best impersonation of his daddy, And I take and man, I could flip that little Zebco, man, all the way across the creek, dude, just like a slingshot. And so I swung it over there and let it fall down, and I'm reeling it back, and bam, I get a trout, like the first or second cast, man. And so I bring it back up, and he's like, wow, he's like, well, that was just luck. And I'm like, okay, all right, hot shot. So I throw it over there, and a couple of casts later, I catch a little redfish, and he's kind of getting, snorty there, like a little pig, snorting around, kind of huffing and puffing a little bit. And I'll make another couple of casts and catch another trout. And I said, you want that rod back now, buddy? And he's like, yeah, I want it back. And I said, no, I'm going to keep it now. I handed it back to him, man, and he ended up catching a fish, but he just needed the confidence built in him, to know that it worked. And, I was kind of eased up a little bit and tried to work with him a little bit, but competition makes us better sometimes too. But that's probably I've got a lot of great stories, man, but that's probably one of my favorite fishing stories right there.
That's awesome.
So another thing we always ask, and it may be a little bit different for you. I'll ask the question. We usually ask, what do you usually talk about when you're out there? But since you're guiding a lot of different people, what do you find yourself talking to them about, or what are they asking you about mostly? Is there one or two particular things? I know the horses out there, people that are not from Eastern North Carolina, you got to figure out, where the dang horses came from that are on Shackleford and the other places out there. But what are the most people asking you? What do you find yourself talking to those clients about?
I do a lot of local history and ecology talking and folk stories when I'm out there. It really just depends on the people, but I get a lot of people who want me to explain to them why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why are we fishing here? Why are we using this? Why? That's probably and I like that challenges me, and I can engage with them that way. That's probably the number one thing, and I just kind of make that last for a good portion on and off throughout the whole charter. But the next question that I get a lot is, how did you come about doing this? And so that's why I've kind of learned how to incorporate that into my podcast and my intros and stuff that I do. But I would have to say that other than local history questions, which are every day, and then the why and the how and all that probably the next question is how did you end up becoming a fishing guide? That's probably the next one that I get the most of.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, another thing we do with all of our guests is a what's your favorite segment, just to have some fun. It's self-explanatory. We're going to ask you your favorite in a few different categories. Robert, you got your first time questions ready?
I don't have them. Why don't you roll through these, because I'm on my different device, so I can't cheat and look at my phone, because my phone is what I'm using to record tonight. So that's all you, brother.
All right. Well, we're going to do things just a tad different. I am not going to drop us all out this time, because I don't want any more technical difficulties. I've already pushed Murphy's Law as far as it can go tonight. So we're going to just dive right in like this. All right. So we are going to do those questions right after this. Few things ruin your day on the water as bad as losing gear. But with the retrieval devices for fishing rods, action cams, bow fishing bows, and more from Save Your Outdoors, you don't have to let dropping your stuff ruin your day, because you can get it back. The pressure-sensitive filter keeps water from rain and quick dips in the water out, but it lets water in when your gear goes overboard to release a float attached to your gear by 60 feet of line so you can get it back. Go to SaveYourOutdoors.com to learn more and try some for yourself, and use promo code FNFP15 to save 15% on your order. That's SaveYourOutdoors.com and promo code FNFP15.
A huge selection and crazy fast shipping is already enough to turn heads as an online tackle shop, but Omnia Fishing sets themselves apart with their ambassador program. With Omnia, you can send in fishing reports for your local lakes that recommend baits, structure, tactics, and gear. And when another angler takes your advice and purchases something from your report, you get credit for it to spend at Omnia. The best part means that with Omnia Fishing, you can shop by lake and purchase baits and gear that are proven to work where you're fishing. To get started, go to OmniaFishing.com and use promo code FNF15 to save 15% on your first order.
All right. So first off, what is your favorite scripture?
Ephesians. Wow, that caught me off guard there. I'm a little rusty on that, but actually I would pick the whole book of Ephesians. Quite often I would start out to read the scripture and I would just end up reading it all the way through. But I like Ephesians, and Corinthians would be next. But quite often both, First and Second Corinthians, I've gone to read just a passage of scripture and ended up reading the whole thing.
Awesome. All right, what about a particular story from the Bible? Is there one of those that's your favorite?
All the way back from when I was a kid, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire. That's probably my favorite story.
That is awesome. That is the same story that Ricky Kellum mentioned last week. He said the fiery furnace, so that's awesome. All right, so your favorite fish to catch?
I like redfish, and I'll take a minute to explain why. Because they can go from I've fished them in 35-degree water, and I've fished them in 90-degree water. I've fished them in 40 foot of water, and I fished them in 4 inches of water. An adult redfish lives to be 35 to 50 years old, and everything that it avoids and survives its entire life to live that long. There's a lot of awesome fish out there. All kinds of billfish, sharks, everything. Every creature in the sea is amazing in its own way. Octopus is probably my favorite sea creature, but of all the fish that I've hunted and caught, and I didn't even like redfish when I was a kid. They were junk fish to me. I was all about speckled trout. So redfish have become, through hunting them in every environment that I could think of around here, they've become my favorite fish, probably because of their ability to adapt and survive.
Awesome. All right, so they're your favorite to catch. Are they also your favorite to target?
Yep, they're my favorite to target, and they're a black and red fish on the half shell. The way I make it is really one of my favorite to eat too. And I like all kinds of Atlantic bonito. I've eat about everything: swordfish, mako shark. I've eat smoked sailfish, smoked white marlin, smoked blue marlin. I've eat ray. I've eat just about everything you can imagine from the sea at some point or another. But they've kind of become my favorite to eat too. So favorite to catch, favorite to target, favorite to eat.
Well, that was the next question. So 3 for 3. We don't get 3 for 3s very often on those 3 questions, but I mean, can't argue much with any of those.
Nope.
Well, I typically, when people ask me that question on charters, I break it up. I said it's hard because I've got them all broken into subgroups. You got pelagics and bottom fish and all kinds of stuff, and I kind of have one in each category. But, at least for the last few years, the redfish has been my favorite for 3 for 3 anyway.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's with redfish, there's, you can be pretty diverse with one fish. I mean, you can go all the way from puppy drum to bull reds and have completely different experiences with all of them. So, I mean, it's can't go wrong with that answer.
When you catch them on a grass flat in 10 inches of water, they fight one way. When you catch them, in 40 foot of water or 60 foot of water on an artificial reef, they fight another way. And then when you catch them from the surf, out of a wave, they fight a whole nother way, And so they all kind of, even though they're pretty similar, and you put them in one environment or another, they may fight kind of the same, but in each environment, they fight a little different. And one thing I was going to tell you, Robert, about learning some surf tricks, you may already know, but Elias V is his handle on YouTube, and he works at Intercoastal Anglers some. He's pro staff there, but Elias V, he has really good YouTube videos about fishing a lot of those wrecks down there. He's a really good kayak fisherman.
Good. I'll look him up for sure. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Man, with all of this information and the spots he was talking about earlier, I don't know if I want to air this episode or not. I just want to have this as a
Just keep it for ourselves.
exactly. All right, so what is your favorite fishing snack?
Oh man, I love that one. I seen they did a thing about that a few years ago. Well, beef jerky's pretty hard to beat, but I'm gonna tell you, all in all, what it comes down to for me more frequently. And when I read this the last time somebody did one of these and did it on Facebook, it tricked me out because I share the same favorite as Captain Greg Voliva, and that is a red Gatorade and some Vienna sausages. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner of champions right there.
I hear you. Yeah, you're definitely not alone on the Vienna sausages thing, but I'm not on that train.
I get it, man. I get it. It's kind of like Ric Flair. Whether you like it or not, sometimes you got to learn to love it because it might be the best thing on the boat.
That's right.
Absolutely. All right, so you don't have to give away GPS coordinates or secret spots. I mean, you've already given some of them, but what's your favorite body of water to fish?
Raleigh Bay, the east side of the shoals, particularly between Cape Lookout and a lot of people call it Drum Inlet. You can say that if you want, but the inlet that's open now is actually Ophelia. It's several miles to the south of Drum. It used to be another inlet back in the 1800s. I forget what it was called, but we call it Ophelia. It's in the vicinity of Drum, but I would have to pick between Cape Lookout shoals and there would be my favorite stretch of water.
All right. And your favorite lure to throw?
Oh man, it'd be pretty tough to beat I don't know, that's a tough one. Just a plain old metal jig's hard to beat a gold spoon and a bucktail. So I would probably some sort of bucktail if would be one of my top picks. So you can make a little bucktail or a big bucktail, but that you can catch about anything you want on a bucktail of some size or another.
Absolutely. I've used bucktails bass fishing. I mean,
yep.
Anything that'll eat a fish will eat a bucktail.
That's right. If it'll eat a bait fish pattern, it'll eat a bucktail of some size.
Absolutely. All right, let's see. All right. I think this is last but not least. What's your favorite time of year to fish?
Fall, September, October. I mean, but if you want to just say the whole season of fall would be my favorite time of year to fish.
All right. Well, we are going to start wrapping things up. What's coming up next for Captain Joe?
I'll be getting geared up. It'll be flood tide fishing and the Spanish and bluefish thing. That on cobia, I'll go look for some cobia. I left that out earlier. I do the cobia thing too, but I like them, but I don't put a lot of stock into them here the last few years like I did, 2012, 2011. But that's probably, I'll look to see if some big Hatteras blues show up and hope to find a few cobia there. And if not, it'll be looking forward to putting people on their first topwater bluefish and flood tide fishing for drum. That's what I'll be getting fired up about next.
I hear you. I would love to cast for some cobia one day.
It's great, man. When you can see them and get them to chase something, there's nothing quite like seeing one, especially if you can get them to eat a topwater plug. But there's nothing quite like that cobia, that big shadow, and it starts to turn her head up, and you see her gills flare out, and you can see the white inside of her gills, and she's getting ready to eat, and then some little 30-incher comes out from underneath of the
I remember, I don't remember what dock we were on. It was either down near Oak Island or it was up on the Outer Banks. But it was one of the things that my dad and I always liked to do was whenever we were on vacation was go and watch them unload their catches at the docks. And the first time we ever saw a cobia, we were like, "What in the world is that?"
It looked like a dinosaur, man. They
It
were
was
crazy
just,
looking.
it was mahi, 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 mackerel, mahi, mahi, and then all of a sudden it was this massive, like, from, I being the fish nerd that I was, that would sit down and study my aquarium fish books all the time. I was like, where did they get a snakehead in the ocean? But it was 4 feet long and just this massive fish. And I was like, I want to know everything there is to know about that. And I mean, to this day, best fish I've ever eaten. But I'm looking forward to one day getting a chance to cast for some of those. But
they're one of the best in the sea to eat, man. And I put them kind of in their own category a lot of times because there's nothing else quite tastes like them. My first cobia, I think I was 6 or 7 years old, and my dad had a 28 Bertram at the time, and we were winter fishing, early winter, late fall fishing for wahoo down around the Swansboro Hole, and we pulled over some bottom. We had the planer rigs down on we fished planers on downriggers. Ran wire line on them, wire cable, and fished our setups that way. And the planer went off on a drone spoon, and this big black thing came up out of the bottom, you could see down, 30 foot deep, 40 foot deep. And I just kept watching this big black thing come up to the surface kind of slow, like a submarine rising or something. And it was, probably 6 foot long, one of the biggest fish I'd ever seen at the time. And right beside it came another one with it. Its mate, probably. They pushed out there together, and it was bigger than it. It was probably 6.5 foot long. And my dad was like, "Holy cow!" When it first came up, he's like, "Oh, it's a shark, a mako or something." And then when he saw that white, Mr. Brown suit tuxedo there. When he saw that, he's like, "Oh no, that's a cobia. Get the gaff, And he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get it gaffed." And no cobia came in our boat alive back then. That was the rule. And he had one beat a cooler slam apart on him, but that was the very first cobia I ever remember seeing right there. Other than maybe a few, like you said, in a fish market or something. But to see one in the water coming up out of the bottom like that on a drone spoon was pretty cool.
Absolutely. All right. If people want to, if listeners want to follow you on social media, if they want to book a charter, tell them how they can find you, where to go for social media. If you got like a YouTube channel or something like that, or just your charter business in general, give the plugs.
All right, man. Sounds good. So I got a website, www.ctguideco. My Instagram handle is ctguideco, and you can follow me on my personal page on Facebook. That's Joe Tunstall, Tunstall, or Carolina Traditions Guide Company. And I believe I just recently changed my handle on YouTube to CT Guide Co. as well. But you can probably look up my name and find it that way, or it'll be under, let's see. Yeah, it's at CT Guide Co. All one word, from my YouTube page. I got some videos. I've got a 100 video playlist for learning how to fly fish. So everything you want to know about tying leaders or different casts and all that, we put that together for a casting clinic, but it's all under Carolina Traditions Guide Company or CT Guide Co. Got a Google page. It all shows up on there with the address of how to find me. Got my phone number on all those links, and I'd be glad to talk to anybody about anything. I like getting people fired up about fishing. That's what I do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to give you a chance to shout out any sponsors or supporters, anybody you want to say thank you to. The floor is yours.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Well, I got some good folks out there. I want to say how much I like that Element series by Cashin, man. They really hit a home run with that. A few little things I'll change, but overall, that's a phenomenal rod, and I'm really happy to be able to use those. I got Florida Fishing Products. I've been with them since early on. Went away from them and came back to them, and I'm really happy with what they're doing. My buddy Chris Sensi was Slayer. I've been with him for a long time. He's a great dude, American-made fish slaying products. Clark Spoon's really good to me. Cortland Line's really good. Rapala Lures. I've got dry fit waders. Diablo Paddle Sports for my kayaks. Got a lot of good people who look after me, and a lot of good small businesses, stuff made in the U.S. And I take the hit sometimes about getting a price break, but I'd rather take a hit to support small businesses here in the United States, other companies like Cashin or whatever. So I'm glad to be able to do what I do, and blessed to be able to afford to support those companies, and also be blessed to have them believe in me. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and I wanted to give a shout out to Cash and Rods for giving us the opportunity to get connected. So, absolutely. Well, Captain Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This has been probably the show that I've learned the most on, but it's been one I have thoroughly enjoyed.
I appreciate it, Cam. Robert, nice to meet you, buddy. I know you from somewhere, so it's good to talk to you.
It may be chasing tails. We go in there quite a bit when we're down that way, so that may be maybe where you see my face at. But you guys were talking about those Element series, and that tournament that I just fished is the first time I used that worm and jig rod, and I'm telling you, you could feel everything on the bottom with that worm and jig rod. I was thoroughly impressed with that. So I've got to get another one of those, so I don't have to switch my worm and my jig. I can have one for my worm and a different one for my jig, because it's a night and day difference from the one I was using before. And so yeah, that's a big shout out to them. And ton of information. Appreciate you sharing that, Joe. So a ton of information in this. So I'll definitely be sharing some links to the podcast, so some people can get some good information. And great faith story. And I appreciate your time tonight. Learned a lot.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on here. It means a lot. And if I can ever help you guys out for any other saltwater questions in the future, I'll be glad to be indulged by you guys again. I love it.
I'll hit you up.
I'll try not to blow your phone up too much. If finesse fishing is your comfort zone, something you want to learn better this year, or just something you like to tie on as a Hail Mary pass, Jade's Jigs has everything you need and more, and it's all eco-friendly and lead-free. With an awesome selection of baits and colors, they've got a variety of techniques covered for you. Finesse jigs, underspins, Nico weights, Ned rigs, and more are all waiting for you at jadesjigs.com. And while you're there, use promo code FNF10 for 10% off your purchase. That's jadesjigs.com and promo code FNF10 for 10% off.
Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle is one of the largest canoe, kayak, and cycling retailers in the Southeast, with a huge selection of kayaks, canoes, bikes, and all the accessories needed to experience paddling and cycling comfortably and safely. Get Outdoors helps to expand and educate the paddling community through their free demos held on local lakes in the Greensboro, North Carolina area, and through in-store clinics and on-the-water courses and demos. And we'll even get your new boat rigged up for kayak fishing for you. Stop by the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or check out shopgetoutdoors.com to be wowed by their selection.
Another huge thank you to Joe for coming on the show and sharing his story with us, and just sharing a whole lot of saltwater information. His links will be in the show notes so that you can get a hold of him and hopefully get a charter set up. Robert, man, We got off to a late start and everything, so we're running late on this one. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Oh yeah, that was a great episode. Joe really did share a ton of information, and I mean it's truly amazing to me. Now I will say that the kayak world is slightly different than the boat world in bass fishing, but even in the kayak side, there's a lot of information that people will hold back. And I have found that all the saltwater guys, they don't really hold anything back. They will tell you where they're catching them at. And a lot of times if we're out fishing mahi or wahoo, those guys are on the radio and they're telling each other what's working, what's not working, what area they're in. And, it's funny to me that the difference between the information sharing as far as bass fishing, especially boat side, versus the saltwater guys. So truly appreciate the information that he shared and to share his faith story. It was a great episode.
Absolutely. Well, man, will you close us out in prayer tonight?
Yeah, we'll do it.
I do have a prayer request. Previous guest of the show, Russell Dillon, he's been going through some tumor growth in his new growth in his brain. I had a little bit of bleeding in the brain and had to have a surgery this week to loosen up some of that pressure, and everything seems to have gone well, but just shoot a quick prayer out for him and his family real quick. But yeah, man,
we'll do it. Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us this time to speak about faith and to share our love of the outdoors with everyone listening and our guest. Please watch over us as we go through another week. Give us the strength and the words to draw people closer to you. Please watch over Russell and help his family in this time of healing, and watch over our families and everybody that's listening, and forgive us of our sins. And in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You want to sign us out?
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in. Appreciate Captain Joe, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I wasn't ready. Here we go. Thank you for listening to the Faith and Fishing podcast. Faith and Fishing is produced and hosted by Cam Steele and Robert Randolph, and is sponsored by Savior Outdoors, Jay's Jigs, Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle, Mr. B Lure Company, Atollas, and Omnia Fishing. Don't forget to join the Facebook community, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever app you're listening on. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care, and God bless.